Quibbles, if you want to talk, you can jump into my Discord. I have cleared everything else up, so um, you can jump into Den of Fools and we can we can talk. Mm. Yeah, I was saying earlier, I don't normally debate things. Like I say a lot, like I like educate people on this stream. I don't really like consider it educating. What I do is I convince people. That's what I do. That's that's my goal. That's my gift. That's always my aim is to convince people or to get them to just agree with smaller things to the point where they've already lost
Mhm.
because they've agreed with a couple of small things. So um, that's normally the direction that I try to take things. And I don't like the like rhetorical stuff where people think they have to like yell at people or they have to what do you call it, like say ridiculous,
Destroy.
yes, like yes, or they have to get them to admit this or something like that. Like I don't care about that freaking crap. Like I get that, like for the audience that looks really cool, but I'm going to get a
Mhm.
couple key parts in every debate, and then later I will go back to those and say, see, they admitted it. It's and they're all going to be like, oh crap, I didn't realize that at the moment, but yeah, I guess they did. I guess they did admit that. Like, okay,
Interesting. Yeah.
um,
Okay.
so
Okay. So let's
let's
talk about ACAB.
yeah, let's wait, let me pull up the tweet. I think I've got it pulled up um
Yeah, no
already.
worries. I can try to find it as well.
Again, I think most everybody in my community has already
Hmm.
heard me talk about this a couple of times, but they heard me talk about it with like SJWs and like anarcho communists. So it wasn't really productive like in any way. Like they already came in not making sense. So
Gotcha. Yeah,
Anna
that
the
happens
Nugget,
sometimes. I had a
appreciate the
very
follow.
unproductive conversation earlier today.
I've been trying to get Anna the Nugget on my panels for months now. Oh my goodness, dude. She is a busy person. She's in school and
This is true.
streaming. She's got a really big community too, dude. She's killing it right now. Dude, this is this
Yeah.
tweet really this far down? Where the hell is it?
If you find it, if you can drop it in our Discord chat, that'd be awesome. So I can pull it up on my end too. Yeah. Oh yeah. By the way, I'm recording on my end. I'm sorry, I didn't say that, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
All right, here it
Um.
is. Oh yeah, I gotta go to share.
Oh, I found it. It's the hot take. The
Yep.
explanation for ACAB can be applied to anyone from the same race relations. Yeah. So I'll pull that up both on my end and on yours. All right. Give me a second.
Um,
I
if
just
you
sent it to you
share
on
it on the
Discord in a
screen, you're
private
gonna
message.
yeah. If you share it on the screen, you're gonna screw me up over here. So don't.
Oh yeah. No, I'm doing my own thing on my end, but
Okay.
yeah, I shouldn't be showing up on your screen. Yep.
Okay.
All right.
So I got it. I got it pulled up for everybody over here as well. Um.
Okay. So hot take, the explanation that ACAB can be applied to anyone
I'm
in a same
sorry.
race relationship.
One
You're
second.
contributing to
Appreciate
racism.
the tier 1 sub, Anna. That's very nice. Thank you. Anna,
Okay.
everybody go check out Anna the Nugget. This is a cool chick, for real. Aiko does like
Hmm.
all Asian panels with her sometimes too. They're very
I
good.
don't know her actually, but that's cool.
Yeah, sorry.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. So, have you pulled it up on your end? I haven't seen your.
Yes.
I've been checking your.
It's
Yes.
up on
Okay.
my side.
Awesome. Okay. What do you mean by this?
Okay, so
Just the most like, if you're gonna like give it like a quick sort of overview.
yeah, so the general idea is that ACAB is that like the let me think for a second. So police are working within a racist and corrupt system, and by being a
Mhm.
part of that system, they are now bastards.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
being a part of it
So
means that they are perpetuating it and enforcing it, and so therefore they are bastards. Well, let's just say they're bad, like because that's the overall sentiment. So, yeah.
okay, sure. So I guess the question would be then, like, do you think that white children are a problem? The existence of white children is a problem.
Well, I think the existence of like different races is a problem.
The existence of racism or the existence of different races?
I don't think that racism can exist if there aren't different races.
Do you think that there are ways to like we have lots of different colors of eyes,
Mm-hmm.
but I would assume you'd grant that there's not. Sure, there's the Aryan kind of stuff, but that was mostly about racism. It wasn't mostly about eye color.
Yeah.
So I would assume that you would grant that like the difference between blue eyes and green eyes is not something that we're truly seeing like a problem around, even though there's a difference biologically, even though there's a difference in terms of like the color itself, right?
Right. Yeah. Skin color is a much more obvious characteristic that you can see from much farther away. It's something that, like, we're always going to fall into groups and categorize things, and tribalism is always going to exist. But race
Mhm.
is something that is more obvious than any other sort of characteristic that I could name.
Do you think that so in your mind, do you think that it's impossible to end racism without ending racist, or rather ending races, like the existence of race? Can you
Um,
can you have it if there's still people who look black and still look white?
I don't think that you can end racism as long as there are different races. No. So, like, I think that there will always be some type of racism as long as there are different races.
Okay. Do you think that race is a constant? Do you think that like when you're thinking of a black person, do you think that the blackness is the same if you're in America or if you're in South Africa or if you're in, Cambodia, wherever it might be?
I mean, I think the social construct is going to be different depending on the society.
Okay. I would agree for sure. So I guess my concern would be then if like I would assume you grant that what it means to be Irish in the United States today is a very different thing than what it meant to be Irish in the United States 100 years ago,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh,
So why is it impossible? Like I would assume that you would say that Irish people are white in the United States today, right?
Mhm.
But that wouldn't be true 100 years ago when there were Irish need not apply signs all over, when there was this idea of the sand N-word, when there was this idea of the potato N-word. There are certain groups of people who are now considered to be white, but at a previous point in our history as a country, were not considered to be white in this country.
Mhm.
So couldn't that be expanded to a point beyond where it is currently?
Well, I think I don't know how to say this in a way that sounds good. Like, I think that racism was almost like more educated back then, where it meant more, and there were more categorizations of race. So, like, you and I have had, like, a very small tiff back and forth on this, where, like, racism now is just based on what you look like. So if you look black, you're just black. If you look white, then you're just white. They had a whole lot more categorizations within those before, but now it's just as simple as if you look white, then you're white. If you look black, then you're black, right?
No, I would not grant that. So in the United States today, there's some degree of that in some capacity. That's certainly not the case if you're thinking about like what does it mean to be Jewish in the United States. Ben Shapiro, a lot of examples of Jews who wouldn't consider me to be Jewish because my mother wasn't Jewish. That's something not about how I look. That's something not about how I was raised in terms of religion. That's something about a very specific lineage tree that they're trying to build. So it's much more complicated than just, do I have hair that looks Jewish?
Right. Um,
So that would be
I would
an example of a race thing that's beyond, right?
kind of. I mean, I would say that like most Jews in the United States are white, though.
I think that would be a very complicated conversation. We can have it, but it's a very complicated conversation. Certainly, I would assume you'd grant that in the Holocaust, Jews were not considered white,
Of course.
right?
Right, but we've already like
So
admitted
that's
that
kind
there
of the point.
was a
Yeah.
lot of different ways of looking at race back then.
So if race can change, why couldn't race change to a point where what we currently consider to be black are no longer considered to be black,
In the
despite
way,
no change in their actual skin color?
in the way that we're discussing it changing, we're saying that it went from being more complicated and having more categories to less complicated and having less categories.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I
So the Irish used to be a different category than the white people, but now we just consider Irish people to be white in the United States.
Mhm.
That's not true everywhere, but it is true in the United States for the most part.
Right. So yeah, I don't know how we would do this when within those parameters of it either getting more complicated or less complicated. Um,
But
like,
you
what are
don't know how race
suggesting?
would become less. I'm suggesting that Irish people haven't changed the way they look between the 1910s, when there was incredible racism against Irish people in the United States, and
But the way
today,
that we
when there is
categorize it
comparatively
has
very little.
changed.
But the way that we've categorized is, so when you're saying that people of the same race shouldn't be in relationships, that's suggesting that race is constant. That's suggesting that for whiteness as it's currently constructed,
Mhm.
to be unpacked and to be broken down, the only way to do that is for us to say that the current white people need to have children who are not solely from Germany. They
Okay.
have to have kids who are also from Ireland in order to include Ireland, or Irish people in the conception of what white people are.
I
Right?
just need to clarify something real quick. Just for the
Yeah.
chat, I am not saying that people who are different races should not be in relationships. Just so you guys understand.
Yeah, I think that's clear.
Yes,
If
we are
people don't
using
realize
this-
that, they're dumb.
yes, we are using this within an analogy.
No, I get that.
So I know you get it. I just want the chat to understand. I am not saying that people who are different races should not be in relationships, okay? That is not what I'm saying at all.
Yes.
Please do not think that that's what I'm saying.
I don't think you're saying that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. What I do think you're saying is that you're suggesting that the existence of parents of white children is a comparable problem of the existence of police.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah,
So-
I'm saying that if we're going to say that it just being in a system and perpetuating a system and reinforcing a system that we consider to be bad makes you bad by default, then if you are having sex with somebody who is the same race as you and creating children, then you are creating children who are going to perpetuate race and therefore racism.
But we already established that the Irish can have kids with other Irish people and still, without like digesting and losing their Irishness, become white over a period of time.
Right.
And so the children of Irish people in 1910 who absolutely obviously weren't white, now, at least, or their grandchildren at the very least, perhaps, are now in 2021 considered absolutely to be white in this country, even though they didn't necessarily sort of, breed mix or whatever you want to call it. That's sort of like a gross way of saying it. But they didn't sort of mix the gene pool with Germans or with British people, or specific, or with people who are already considered to be white.
Yeah.
It just happened organically because of a change in culture. So there's a way to break that down simply at a cultural level without changing the actual breeding pool. There's no need for that to be done at a level of like you have to have sex with the right people in order for the children to look the right way in order to ultimately become white.
So I'm still not understanding, like, specifically what would
So the
we
point-
be changing this to? Because I don't think that there's like.
So we would,
I
yeah.
think
So
that
so if
making-
you're
I think that making race less complicated is a good like sort of progress within race where people are now accepted within a culture that they before they would not have been accepted within, right? But I don't
The
think
point,
that we can broaden it to the point where white and black people are the same race. I don't think that like
I
we
think
can
that
do that.
people 100 years ago, I think 100 years ago, people would never say that you could make an Irish person like Nick Fuentes. I don't know if you know him, but he is his name is Nick Fuentes, and he's a white supremacist, right?
Yeah.
He has obvious Hispanic roots, and yet he's a white supremacist.
Right.
Now, on one level, the fact that he's a white supremacist is probably bad. But on another level, his name is Nick Fuentes, and he's able to be a white supremacist because the whiteness, the definition of whiteness has broadened to such a degree that literally you can be named Nick Fuentes and be accepted in white supremacist groups, which is insane. So if we can build out, if we can broaden the conception, even in the most racist circles of society, of what whiteness means, to where they're able to accept Nick Fuentes as a component of whiteness, I don't know why you wouldn't be able to get to a point where black people, who for context, the average black person in the United States is, because of a history of slavery and because of a history of sort of institutionalized rape, the average black person in this country is like 30% white, right? In terms of, if you like go back through the lineage of the average black person in the United States, like there's a huge component of their genealogical tree that is white. So like, it seems very sort of odd that we would say that it's impossible to broaden whiteness without literally having children with people who look dramatically distinct from ourselves.
But when we broadened it to the point where we are judging race based on what you look like. And Nick Fuentes looks white, therefore he is white.
But the point is, you wouldn't describe it that way previously. You would say that someone who has an eye, like I have a red beard, but I don't think that's even something that you're even necessarily conscious of when you're looking at me. In the same way that you're not necessarily conscious of my eye color,
right.
The red beard is no longer something that you're like looking for,
right.
That you're like aware of in the way that you certainly would be aware in our current culture if I had black skin.
Again, though, racism still exists. We've just broadened what we've put into
right,
each
but the point though is,
and so I'm not understanding how we would broaden it further, like to just say
we
like
would
you
broaden
look
it further.
Like a human.
Yeah. I mean, we now have a conception of you look like a European, right?
Kind of, yeah.
That was certainly not a thing. 1,000 years ago. There was an idea of an Irish person looks different than a British person, and a British person looks different than a Spanish person, and a Spanish person looks different than a French person, and all of this. But that's totally disappeared. We no longer have this idea of like the Viking. We no longer have this idea of like a specific sort of look of these individual regions, where there was a time that Catalonia was supposed to have a different sort of look than broader Spain. Was supposed to have a different look than Portugal. And that seems like a very sort of outdated conception that we no longer like accept within our culture in the United States. And we don't even accept it really at some level, even in Europe, where certainly their race is very complex and very different than ours.
Yeah. So again, I'm trying to get specific here. So you're saying that we would broaden it to the point where we would just say you look human instead of you look white or you look black.
I think that we would have I think we still might have like other ways that we apply differentials between one another. I think we might have ideas of, we might base things and base conceptions on people in different ways, but I don't think that you necessarily have to have the number of sort of conceptions that are based on things that we aren't able to control for, be a larger number and a more important component of the way that we think of one another than the components that we are able to control for. So like for example, I'm able to change the color of my hair now. That wasn't always true throughout history, but it certainly is true now. Right? I'm able to change I'm able to get a boob job. I'm able to, I'm able to get a nose job. I'm able to get certain things that are going to sort of change the way that I appear. And these things can be things that we think about in the same way I think as like relatively important components of like who we are, and how do we interact with society. But I don't think that any of this is constant. I don't think any of this is stagnant. And so I'm uncomfortable with the framework of this as being the same as the institution of policing.
It's not the same as the institution of policing. The thought process to get from A to B to say, because of these institutions or because of the framework of these institutions, these people are now bad, right? That is, I'm using the thought process to say this is a flawed thought process. And when you compare it to other things in the same manner, it shows how flawed of a thought process this actually is, and you wouldn't use this for anything else. You only use it for this because you want to find a way to say that cops are bad. You're being very pedantic, and when I apply this to other things in the world and I try to find the worst example, like this is on purpose, when I say this to other lefties, they're like, oh Tom, don't say that, oh it sounds so bad. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. It's supposed to sound horrible. It's supposed to sound like you believe a horrible thing, and that now, when you refuse to apply it to other things, you are proving how hypocritical you're being.
So let's broaden this to a different direction. So you've taken one extreme. Let's take the opposite extreme. I am obviously not saying police are the same as Nazis, but let's suggest that in this context we're going to frame it in that way. Mm-hmm. So let's read my hot take. My hot take is the following. The explanation for ACAB can be applied to anyone who is a Nazi being bad. Mm-hmm. If you are a Nazi, you're a bastard. Are you comfortable saying that all Nazis are bastards?
I don't know. That's a complicated question.
Now, I want to clarify. I'm not saying, because some people were forced to become Nazis, right? But I'm saying if you choose consciously to become a Nazi, which in the case of policing is fair, right? Everyone chose to be a police officer. In this country, we've not forced anyone to become a police officer. So if you chose consciously to be a Nazi, does that make you a bastard?
Yeah, just for the sake of the example, I'll say yes. But like all in all, like I think that when those sorts of things are normalized within your society, like it's hard to say that you're complicit in that.
Okay, so my response would be, obviously, we would say that this statement, all cat lovers are bastards, is a dumb statement because there's nothing wrong with loving cats, right? But obviously, the statement, all Nazis are bastards, is a totally valid statement. ANAB, in the words of Small Forest. Mm-hmm. Yes, ANAB. So, yes, if we accept that all Nazis are bastards, that suggests that this isn't just an institutionalized, you can't say that because an institution is bad, that makes everyone bad. That's something that you are comfortable with in the case of the Nazis. And it's something that you're not comfortable with in the case of cats, right? Because I don't think that the institution of the love of cats is a bad institution. But I think that the institution of Nazism is a bad institution. So we're not actually talking the framework of this compared to the race relations is only valid if we accept the basic premise that the existence of white children is a problem. I don't accept the basic premise that the existence of white children is a problem. I think it's much closer to the existence of cat lovers or the entity that is the love of cats. And it's much further away from the entity that is being a Nazi.
Well, you saying the existence of white children is a problem is like saying the existence of cops is a problem. Nobody really thinks that the existence of cops is a problem.
The existence of...
I understand that nobody thinks, though, that the existence of cops is a problem. They think the existence of the institution that they work for is a problem. In that example, I wouldn't be saying white children are a problem. I'm saying that race is a problem.
The institution of the creation of new whites is a problem. Is that a fair assessment of what you're saying?
It's not just whites. It's black people.
Okay. The institution of the creation of new whites or the new blacks or new, name your race. I don't agree that the creation of new Irish people definitionally will result in anti-Irish sentiment. Because I look at the history of Irish people comparing 1910 and 2010, and it's a very different relationship. that the society in general has with those two people, even though obviously in terms of the look, they're not that dissimilar.
Here's the problem though. You're saying like, okay, but there are other ways of getting rid of racism, and this isn't the only way. That's fine. But can we all not agree that if race didn't exist, there would no longer be racism? Like, is that too hard of a concept? Like, it seems pretty simple. If there's no longer race, then there's no longer racism, right?
If there's no longer race, there's no. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay. So that's.
We agree.
If there's no, we don't, because I firmly disagree. We do not agree.
That's you just answered the question that I'm going to play later. That's
because
it.
the existence of race,
yeah.
right, and the fact that this is one way to like exit the existence of race does not mean this is the only way to exit the existence of race, and it doesn't even mean that it's the best way of exiting the existence of race.
I agree with that.
Okay, so now this is something I do believe, right? I do believe that all racism is bad, right? Okay, so all racism is bad. One facet of racism is racist cops. That's one facet of institutionalized racism, right? Okay, so does that mean that simply because I think all racism is bad, that I must believe that ACAB, that all cops are bad? Because cops are a component of an overarching system, and one way to tackle ending racism could be to get rid of cops.
Yeah, sure. But this
so
is the
so
same
simply
as saying, like,
saying that I believe
this is the same as saying though, like, I don't believe that getting rid of laws and states and government is the way of dealing with bad police departments. I think there are other ways. I think we can use incrementalism and reform laws and change things and get more oversight and things like that. And then hopefully, eventually, we won't have such a racist and corrupt system, right? This is the same argument, just they don't care. The problem is that currently there is that system, and therefore cops are bastards. And in this same thought process, in the same way, we could get rid of race by all intermixing in over hundreds of years, no longer have race. But currently we do, and therefore the people who use purebred or have purebred children are reinforcing this system.
Okay, so if I accept that racism is bad, that all racism is bad, and I accept that one way to get rid of racism is to kill all of the black people.
Okay.
Does that mean that in order for me to be an anti-racist, I have to kill the black people? Can I still believe that racism is bad while not saying that a particular solution to racism is the correct solution? Because I assume you would grant that if we killed all of the Jews, there would no longer be anti-Semitism.
Yes, I've already admitted there are other ways of getting rid of racism. There are other ways of dealing with police reform.
Okay, so my response would be that the same race relationship way of getting rid of racism is not an acceptable way of getting rid of racism, even if it does get rid of racism.
Of course.
Okay, so where is that lost with respect to the ACAB? What are you missing there?
Again, it's the thought process of what they're using applied to race. If they are saying,
but the point is that these aren't that you can be. We already agreed that you can absolutely say that all Nazis are bad without saying that all people who love cats are bad, because you recognize the badness of Nazism,
right?
And you recognize the badness
in order for it to be applied,
right?
And people believe that. We
believe racism is bad,
right? But we've already agreed that racism would be gone if there was no more race, and we do believe that racism is bad, just as they believe that the system.
Right, but we believe racism is bad doesn't mean that we accept every single solution to racism. One solution to racism is to kill all the black people. If we killed all the black people, there would no longer be anti-black racism. You grant that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I am not comfortable with the solution to racism of killing all the blacks. That seems like a bad solution, right? Okay. I am also not comfortable with the solution to racism of no more same race relationships. That seems like a bad response.
Yes, it's a bad response. This is my point.
I am comfortable. Okay, awesome. But that doesn't mean that other responses aren't acceptable. I can say that, I am comfortable with the response to racism of, hey, maybe we should have a property tax being done at a state level rather than at a local level. Because property tax specifically, I would prefer to move it to a land value tax, but that's a different conversation. Like the way that that's done has the effect of making the education system provided to people in poorer neighborhoods, which is disproportionately going to be Black people, is going to have a lower level of education. That's a problem for a variety of reasons. Most of them are pretty obvious. So like I'm comfortable with that solution, but I'm not comfortable with the solution of no more same race relations. I'm not comfortable with the solution of kill all the Blacks.
Just like I'm not comfortable with getting rid of states or getting rid of laws or getting rid of government.
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
comfortable
So
with
I'm comfortable
reforming
saying
the police department.
Okay, so all localized property taxes are bad. I'm comfortable with that statement. Is that fair? Are you comfortable with that as a statement? Not necessarily that particular, but just like as an example, like,
sure.
Are you comfortable with some responses to racism, but not all responses to racism as a way to fix racism? Okay, so that would suggest that these are not, just because I believe that all cops are bastards, which should be clear, I don't particularly believe myself. But if someone believes that, doesn't necessarily mean that they accept all sort of fixes to racism writ large. It just means that they accept that one.
Okay, so I think this is the problem here. What do you think people who believe that, or people who say ACAB, what do you think they believe the solution to cops being bastards is?
I think that they probably want to dramatically shift. First of all, I don't think it's a good slogan. I think it's a bad slogan for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because of your question that you just asked there.
Attached to it, and it's abolish the police. And that is the solution for them. And so if I think, I'm using their thought process.
Tom, if you're expecting me,
if they want to abolish the police,
if you're expecting me to defend, if you're expecting me to defend ACAB, I'm not going to do that because I don't actually believe it.
I just want you to understand that that is the thought process that I am applying to race. That we are using the same process.
The point is, you wouldn't apply that to everything. We've already granted that you wouldn't apply that to everything. You wouldn't apply to the idea of let's kill all the Black people.
Racism would be gone if there was no longer race. Therefore, race is something that inhibits that. Therefore, race is bad. Like we've already gone over this, and it is the same thing. You can only apply it to things that are bad.
The fact that race is bad doesn't mean that every single solution to race is a good solution to it, even if it's a problem.
I agree with that, but I also don't think cops are bad. This is a thought process that we're applying.
Tom, the ACAB solution is one solution that both of us disagree with. The point is that not agreeing or agreeing with that one solution. Wait. Not agreeing or agreeing with one individual solution to the problem of racism does not mean that you accept all solutions or no solutions to fixing the problem of racism.
It's not the solution, it's the thought process. We are using just the thought process.
But you've already accepted the thought process that you can have both the thought process that all cats are bad or all cat lovers are bad is a dumb thing to say, and all Nazis are bad is a good thing to say.
Yes, we already agree.
So it's not a universalized statement.
It's not universalized. We only apply it to things that are bad. And if getting rid of race would mean that racism ends, then that means in this scenario, with their thought process, racism is bad. Now, I agree that's stupid, just as all cops being bad is stupid, and the state being bad is stupid, and government being bad is stupid.
Are you comfortable with all redlining is bad? Is that a statement you're comfortable with?
I mean, for the sake of the example, I will say yes.
Awesome. All redlining is bad. That's a form of racism. We're not comfortable with it. We want to get rid of literally all redlining in the entire country. Fantastic. By contrast, are you comfortable with the statement, because all race is bad, that we should kill the Blacks? Presumably no, right?
We're going in circles here, man. We already agreed.
No, I just okay, awesome. So that's a no, and this is a yes. These are both solutions to race. These are both solutions to racism, right? But yet they have opposite answers because it's about the context of the solution, not the context of the problem. That's the whole premise of
Right.
everything
But we
said.
also agree that
Okay.
their solution is bad. And so if we agree that their solution is bad, then the solution through their thought process applied to race is also going to be bad.
Okay, so because ACAB is a bad solution.
Not just a solution, a bad thought process with a bad
Okay, so this
solution.
is just so your framework is circular here. Because you don't like the statement ACAB, you're comparing it to other ways of fixing racism that you also don't like. But that's a circular logic. You're already building into that your distaste for the statement ACAB, which is not actually helpful in building it up.
Okay, so apply their thought process to race without doing it the way that I did it.
Apply their statement about race.
Yeah, the thought process of abolish the police or all cops are bastards. Apply that.
Okay, the explanation for ACAB can be applied in the same context for all redlining is bad. You're contributing to racism if you are acting in favor of redlining, and you're contributing to racism if you're acting in favor of the policing system as currently defined.
So you think getting rid of redlining gets rid of racism?
I think it is a necessary component of getting rid of racism. I don't think it's the only thing that's necessary, but I think it's a necessary component, yes.
Okay, so
I don't believe the rest of that statement, but if I did believe the rest of that statement would be that similarly, just as in order to get rid of racism, it's not the only component, but in order to get rid of racism, you would also need to get rid of the policing system as currently defined.
Right. Yeah, you would have to abolish the police in order to get rid of police and
in order to generate a non-racist state. Yeah.
Right. And so when we're saying get rid of racism, you would have to abolish racism. In saying, oh, well, I can find this one component that is part of a process that will eventually get rid of racism is not the same thought process applied.
You would grant that just having mixed children doesn't fix racism unilaterally. That's just a component of an overarching system that would potentially build towards a non-racist state, but it's not going to do it overnight and just like fix it, right?
Correct.
It's not a one-off.
But I'm saying that if we
so that's a component of an overarching strategy towards ending racism.
I'm saying this is a way to abolish race, to where intermixing much will eventually get rid of race and therefore
but not alone.
Race.
That doesn't fix it alone. That's a component of fixing it, but not the totality of fixing it.
Yes, no, within this argument, this is what fixes race, is there no longer being race.
That's it. That fixes all of racism.
Yes.
Simply by having mixed children, you're going to fix all of racism.
We agreed earlier, if there's no longer race, then we no longer have racism. We already agreed on this.
I don't think that simply having mixed children ends race.
Not just mixed
if
children,
you look at
intermixing so much to where there is no way of categorizing people anymore.
Okay, by that logic, if you're gonna take that to the most maximal extreme possible, I could similarly say that if you truly end redlining, not just in terms of the context of ending the problem of literally not having as much money going into black schools, beyond all of that, but you truly get to a point where we're so intermixed that the housing system for blacks is indistinguishable from the housing system for whites in this country. That would mean that we're so intermixed that practically speaking, you're getting to the same point, because there's no way for you to be that intermixed and have a proportional amount of blacks in every single neighborhood and a proportional number of whites in every single neighborhood and Asians and blah, 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 unless you are also in that context ending race.
Yeah, I'm saying, when I say ending race, it would be so intermixed that there's no way for us to categorize people anymore. Okay,
but the point is, I could be equally intermixed if you were intermixed in terms of ending redlining, you could end redlining with such ferocity that you could similarly end race in the same context, right?
End race with ending redlining?
To clarify, when I said redlining, I mean housing discrimination writ large, housing differentials, differential treatment with respect to housing.
You would end race by ending redlining.
by ending the discrimination and the differential between the ways that Black people live, the places that Black people live and the places that white people live.
Are you
Yeah.
saying end racism or end race? I'm
Yeah.
not understanding.
And racism. Well, I mean, I don't think there's a huge difference between ending racism and ending race. I don't think that there's a race that you can really refer to as being Irish in the United States today. I think there certainly was in 1910. The reason that I can say that there was a race of Irish people in 1910 is because there was racism against that race in 1910, whereas there is not today, and therefore I would include that in the broader categorization that is white people, which is the white race.
How does redlining do that? I'm not understanding.
Yeah. So when I'm saying redlining, I'm not just saying, like, if you're saying same race relationships, you're talking about mixed children. You're not talking about so mixed to the extent that you're truly ending all racism, which would require, or ending all race rather. In order to end all race in that way, you would have to have literally no distinction in terms of the way that I look versus how anyone else looks, in terms of our skin pigmentation, and presumably even on other categorizations. There wouldn't be a difference in terms of height.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be a difference in terms of blah 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 blah. Right? Okay. So that's a different thing.
Kind of, though. With this in comparison to police, you can only perpetuate the system as long as you have children with somebody who looks like you. And therefore, if the only way not to do that is by having children with somebody who doesn't look like you, then that is you not perpetuating the system. Is by
okay. So here's a housing policy that I don't believe is a good policy, but here's a housing policy. You're not. This is actually kind of similar to the Singaporean housing policy. Actually, they have built their policy such that you're not able to build housing. Most of their housing is publicly owned, and they design it so that there is a mixing of different racial groups within each of these housing spaces. And so the result of that is that each neighborhood is relatively similar in terms of its racial makeup. And over time, while certainly they're not there yet, I would be shocked if that didn't have the effect of decreasing racism, because I would be shocked if it didn't have the effect of increasing the number of non homogenous children that people are playing with in their schools. Wouldn't change ultimately the racial makeup.
Okay.
And eventually even change the people who people are having kids with.
So
I'm just having some celery.
Yeah. So in this example, the way that we're ending racism is by starting a process that would, or by doing something that is just one component in a process to ending racism, right? You're not saying that
you're suggesting one process.
Yes, you're not saying that like redlining fixes racism in and of itself. You're saying this is one component to the process that will that should help end racism.
So I don't think it's possible to end racism without making it legal for people to have kids with people who are not of their same race. Right? I think that's a necessary component. Yeah. I don't think that it's necessary in order to fix racism for you exclusively in every single case to have kids with someone who's not your race. I similarly don't think that it's necessary in order to end racism for the housing circumstances of every single Black family in the entire country to be identical to the housing circumstances of every single white person in this country. Yeah. But I do think that in order to end racism, you absolutely have to ensure that redlining is over, that anyone is allowed to live wherever they want.
Yeah, I agree with all
I think
of
that.
I just don't think that it fits within the hypothetical.
So the first step of same race relationships are bad is like a second step. It's not the first step. The first step is they have to be legal. I agree with the statement that same race relationships must be legalized in order, and they are legalized at this point, but they must be legalized in order for racism to be over. I agree that first step. I just don't agree that, therefore, the second step must be accepted of the only solution to racism is this specific route towards ending racism, which is the mixing of racial groups at a familial level.
I agree.
That's one direction.
But it fits within the hypothetical, because if all cops being bastards, if the solution to this is no longer having cops, then this is the the parallel within the hypothetical when it comes to race is if we don't want racism anymore, then we no longer have race. How do you no longer have race? Well, you just intermix so much to where you no longer have race. That's the only way that you can do that. And so therefore, the only solution is that everybody intermixes and stops having children with people who look like them. I agree with your point that like these are other points and we can have like a bunch of, we should do this and this and this and break down systemic racism and white supremacy and like all of these other things.
Mhm.
True. But those don't fit within the hypothetical. If, to say like racism is bad, therefore we should get rid of redlining. No, if all cops are bad, getting rid of cops is the answer, then racism is bad. We need to get rid of race.
I don't think that all cops are bad. That the definitional. So to clarify, I've said this prior in this conversation, but to clarify, I am not in support of ACAB. I think it's a dumb statement. However, I don't think that the only solution to ACAB is for every single person who's currently a cop to just like disappear off the map in perpetuity, right? I certainly am comfortable with the statement all members of the SS are bad, right? The SS being part of the Nazis.
Well, before
right?
you go on,
I'm very
do
comfortable
you
with
think
that.
that people who
Yep.
say ACAB would agree with you, or do you think that most of them would say the way to end cops being bastards is by not having cops?
When you say the people who say ACAB, are you saying the leadership or are you saying the rank and file idiots on Twitter?
I mean, people in general, this is the way I understand it. These are the people that I've
Yeah.
conversed with, and
If-
so these are the people that I'm
If
rhetorically
you're asking,
answering.
are there idiots on Twitter who say dumb things? Of course there are. And are there idiots on Twitter who believes dumb things? Yes. But if you're asking about ACAB as like a broader movement, as a broader movement of people who are talking about police brutality and are talking about these issues at a generalized level, do I think the actual leadership who are actually trying to exact real policy, that all of them just believe that the only solution is just like all of these cops should just die or some shit and they should just like disappear and never be involved in public life again? No, I don't believe that that's the thing. I do believe that they think that in the case of particular cops who are particularly vile and have done particularly bad things to particular communities. But I don't think that that if you ask DeRay McKesson what he thinks the solution to racism is, that he would respond to you, "Oh, we should just like kill all the cops," right?
Right. But that,
Okay.
yeah, and so if I thought they were saying we should kill all the cops, then yes, my answer would be, well, we should just kill all the white people, right? Like that would be my answer to it if I thought that that was their solution. But because I think their solution is to get rid of cops, then my solution is to get rid of race.
Gotcha. I feel like we've basically covered this one. What's your view on the what's McCall's the Royals these days?
Oh man, I don't really. I guess I watch some of other people's streams,